The agenda of Paul. There were significant differences in the agenda of Jesus to that of Paul. One of the most important verses in the New Testament is Matthew 5:17. In 5:17, Jesus states why he is here.
Matthew 5:17 through 19 says, "Don't think I came to abolish the law and the prophets. I came not to abolish them, but to fulfill them. It would be easier for heaven and earth to pass away than for a jot or tittle to pass away from the law."
The law that he is referring to is the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible and what Christians called the Old Testament.
The Hebrew Bible and the prophets Jesus speaks of comprise the foundation of Judaism. Jesus is saying, think not that I have come to challenge Judaism, but to fulfill it. Jesus was a reformer. His mission was to bring the Jews back to the old ways of theology. He goes on to say, "You change not a jot or a tittle in Scripture."
What does that mean? That means that a jot and a tittle are the little decorative squigglies that you put onto a Hebrew letter. He says you don't change he doesn't say you don't change a law, you don't change a philosophy or a thought or a paragraph or a word or even a letter. You don't change the tiniest little part of the law or the prophets. You change nothing. This is what he wanted, to get back to that practice of what the scriptures say.
Because Jesus is depicted as rebutting in advance Christian beliefs about what Jesus came to do.
Paul says the exact opposite of Jesus. Paul could not convince Jews that Jesus was divine, so he went outside of Israel to the Gentiles. A Gentile is anyone who is not a Jew.
And wasn't getting any place again, for 2 main reasons. Number one was the dietary law. He restricted the things that they enjoyed and ate all the time. But the biggest one was the circumcision law.
In the first century or so, most all Christians were Jews. But Paul said you don't have to keep the Jewish law. That's a legalism, and you're saved by the blood of Christ, not by keeping the Jewish law. So that he admitted Gentiles without circumcising them, without requiring them to observe Jewish dietary policies or going to the synagogue on Saturday.
As a result, there developed what we call today 2 confessions or 2 denominations, Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians.
But it took a long time for that bifurcation to take place. A lot of the so-called Gentile Christian church were Jews, but they didn't continue observing Jewish practices, thanks to Paul.
But the point that I'm making is that Jesus says, I'm here for this, and Paul says, I'm here for that. Jesus says you change absolutely nothing, and he brings it to an extreme degree. And Paul says, we don't have to obey those cursed laws. Jesus has freed us from them. Of course, that's not what Jesus said.
Remember, the word apostle was reserved for those who were with Jesus and witnessed his doings. Paul claimed to be an apostle, and the Christian church calls him an apostle, even though he was not involved or even knew Jesus. He had died long before Paul.